Welcome, everybody. We're going to be talking about keeping Active Directory afloat with credential compartmentalization. So this is a best practices talk with some demos. Eric's going back and forth between slides and demos.
Oh, did it blink out there?
Yeah, it did.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
You got to keep that
I'm
screen
the
on
window,
just for a few seconds
I don't
longer.
know what happened. Yeah.
So my name is Jason Gillam. I am the CIO of Secure Ideas. And today we have with us Bill. I wasn't sure which order they were going to pop up.
Come in, Bill.
These are animated.
Bill's the important one here. You two are important.
Bill McCauley. So Bill is our he's working on becoming Gandalf. He has a couple more years to go. Working on that beard there. And he's set to be the Red Wizard.
That's right.
And then we have our principal consultant, Eric, who basically looks sideways at SPNs and gets domain admin. And so that's pretty much how that works.
Absolutely.
So we have a couple of experts here in InfoSec. Both are very seasoned pen testers and experts on Windows. And we're going to be talking about how, I guess it's mostly best practices around how do you set up your credentials within your Windows network so that you don't get pwned so easily. So with that said, I will hand it over to you folks.
Sure. Thank you, Jason.
Have a good session.
All righty. So Bill and I were chatting, and number one, we know it's lunch. Lunchtime for some of you, or you're getting ready for lunch. I promise not to talk too fast, but we'll see how we go. And as Jason said, this is kind of around a best talk, but we want to take a quick step back. Bill and I have been doing pen tests now for 5+ years. I think I've been here with security as almost 7 years. Wow, that's a scary thought. That I've been
on 6.
Yeah, coming up on 6. It's hard to believe. And so we've seen some shifts over the last couple of years of how things are kind of working in environments, because not everybody is the same as they were 6 or 7 years ago. But we do see some common things happening back and forth. And it used to be like the biggest problem you'd see on a network was patching, right? Absolutely. Patching was always horrible. Microsoft has kind of taken care of that. Sure, it's a little bit harder now in a way to patch because you have this massive file that you're doing, but we don't have to try and pick and choose. Well, I want to do this patch with this thing and maybe it'll run. It's all done. So patching hopefully isn't a big problem anymore. But Bill, what do you think the next biggest thing is? And you're not allowed to cheat because I know we're talking about credential compartmentalization, so you can't pick that one. But what do you think is the next big one?
So credentials is always going to be an issue no matter where you go. But
Sure.
If I had to pick something aside from that, I would go with SMB relay type pieces.
Oh, nice. SMB relay. Yep, by far one of my favorites too. I love SMB relays. Unfortunately for us, Microsoft is killing that. Right? 100% they're going to kill it. You may not be aware, but Microsoft is turning on SMB signing as a default setting on everything in like 2-3 weeks, I think, as they said by the end of the year. We'll see if it actually happens. So unless you've actively decided to turn it off, you'll be protected. It's kind of like Microsoft has actually said they want to get rid of NTLM. Can you believe that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
wow.
I know. Wow. Considering Microsoft couldn't figure out how to get their own SQL Management Studio software to not use NTLM, I think it's a big call, but maybe they're going to get there. I hope they do, because Kerberos is much better. So, yep. Oh, Jason came back.
Wow. Okay. So I didn't know that.
Jason's like, shock and awe. Yes.
Yeah.
Microsoft is making some huge changes.
They're making some big. I mean, I know that they've been working towards that, but there's a difference between saying, "Hey, we want to do this," or "We're thinking about it," versus we actually have a plan in place, and this is going to happen by such and such a date, right?
Yeah.
I'm actually curious what the implementation of that's going to look like.
Yeah, I mean, I see NTLM hanging out for another couple of years. I mean, there's no way that's going away fast, but yeah, that is a huge shift. I mean, Microsoft is actually doing a bunch of things in the background, and we'll talk about some of that more a little bit. Yeah, dropping NTLM is going to be huge. We'll see if it actually works. Well, anyways, go ahead, Bill.
So does that mean that Kerberos is next?
So Kerberos is here to stay. until you get fully moved over to Azure Entra. Let's get
Well,
the names right, Entra. And then you're using OAuth or SSAML or something else, right? But yeah, I think Kerberos is here to stay. They're not going to replace that.
I wasn't thinking replacement. I was thinking as far as what could be
what next, right?
For. Yeah. What next with it?
And that absolutely, yeah. So Kerberos is here, and that kind of falls back into the big issue now that we have, right? Which is what we're here to talk about too, and the idea of credentials. So way back when, like 1999, so 24 years ago, Microsoft said, you know what? You guys need more than one account. And when I started in IT back in 1998, 1999, that seemed to be the standard, right? The places that I worked, we had two accounts. I remember very dramatically that we had two accounts at Walt Disney World because the admin account had a character in it that worked okay for Windows, but that character started to cause all sorts of problems in other applications. So we had to switch that character to be like a digit instead of a special character. So, yep, more than one account. And I would say this is probably what we see most of organizations using to this day. Would you agree, Bill?
I would say that's accurate. Yes,
yep.
This is very, very common even today.
Even today, we have two accounts. We've got our normal user account, and then we have an admin account that does everything under the sun for us, right? Whatever we need it to do, whoever I might be. There are some places, sorry, I'm always upset when I see them, that still have this one account idea, which is really bad. Usually we're at two. And, I think it is popular, but once again, this is now 24 years, right? I did that math right. Almost 25 years old.
Yep. Well, this is part of what we were talking about earlier is the amount of technology and things that have changed and just in the past 20 years.
Oh yeah.
It's this same model is being used to handle that same technology or to this new technology, which doesn't make sense.
Yep. But people keep thinking about it, as if it is way back then. Two credentials, two IDs are enough. But it's not. We haven't seen a huge shift. And I saw the note. I wish I could. I have to pull this up. Something about Disney characters. I saw that fly in. I think that's hilarious. Yes, Disney characters can only be in so many movies, and then it.
Well, the way that I say rewind it just about 30 seconds or so when you said when you were working, at Disney, characters only worked in one account, and my brain just went straight to like Mickey Mouse sort of Disney character type.
Absolutely.
Mickey
can
like, oh yeah, you mean
like yeah,
like the character you type, not yeah.
Although Disney was not the only place. We're way off on a tangent, but we have time. It's okay.
That's okay.
So the original mail servers for Walt Disney World were the Seven Dwarves, as I remember.
Oh,
funny enough, my father, who wasn't in IT, but when he was doing graduate work, he did the punch card system right back of IT way back when. Their servers were the Seven Dwarfs as well. So that seems to be a common one that hangs out forever. You just never want to have poor Sleepy as the guy that you have to work on, right? Because it's that's the poor underpowered guy. He's the one doing it. All right, so I digress. Two accounts is not enough, and that's what we're here to talk about. We're here to to talk about credential compartmentalization. I admit I did not come up with this term. I think it is an awesome name. And I think it's important. Names have power. We're learning this in InfoSec, right? Everything, if you use the same name as what it was before. So if I said we're going to talk about account tiering and device tiering and privileged access management, privileged identity management, everybody's eyes glaze over because that was like 4 years ago. So we need a new term. So credential compartmentalization came up by a gentleman that we work with quite often. His name is William Cook, really smart guy. He actually coined this term. He told me when I was at a B-Sides and we met up and we were talking about how things are changing. He's like, I have this term. I said, that is the best term ever. So I have to give him kudos to this. I think it's important. As I said, this is a continuation of the idea of device tiering and account tiering and access management and everything all at once. Okay. The idea is that we need more than two accounts. Okay. We have this idea that we have different types of devices out there, and really we need to only use accounts on these devices. We shouldn't have two. So administrators, downside, poor administrators, operation folks, you need to have more than one account. You need to have multiple accounts. And what they can do should be purposeful, and they should only be used when you need to do that thing, whatever it is. Okay. The next big rule is you never used a higher permissioned account on a less secure device. Now, when we say, what is a secure device? We run CrowdStrike and Defender and whatever else, every endpoint tool known to man. So many endpoint tools that our laptops are barely able to let you type in a character. That's great. They're still technically the least secure devices on your network. We're interacting with the internet. We're doing all these things, right? Fair enough. You're right. CrowdStrike is a company, not a project. Falcon Sensor, would that be a better way of saying it? So all of the different tools, whatever it is, absolutely. They are still not very secure. We should not be using administrative accounts, privileged accounts on laptops. We should be using them somewhere else. We want to have this idea of other devices out there where we can use these accounts. And the most important part about this, beyond we have a separation between where we use these accounts, is the accounts have to have different passwords. It does you no good to have 3, 4, 5, 26, like I did at my previous company, different accounts if they all have the same password. Okay. It does you no good. Actually, one thing that we often do, we go in, we're going to do some password spraying, right? Happens all the time. Let's just make sure. Let's see if we can get any credentials through password spraying. And we typically get at least like 5 from the common things of, winter 2023, maybe fall 2023. We're right at the cusp of when people are changing, right? You're going to get a couple, unless people are using a really custom banned password list. Mm-hmm. So then we say, oh, well, I got Jimmy's account over here, his regular account. His password is winter 2023. Oh, Jimmy has administrative accounts. Let's give it a try. Oh, there it is. We just moved, right? Because we tried that password somewhere else.
Or 2023 exclamation.
Or yeah, you're right. Let's add the exclamation point. Very important. Has to be an exclamation point because it's very
technically different.
Yeah, it is
technically different.
Very different. It doesn't work. You need to have different accounts. And really, once again, these 3 principles is how you start to break things down. And you want to start figuring out where these things should be used, where your different accounts should be used. I'm not going to say that this is how you should be doing things, this slide specifically, okay? This is just an example, pure example. Oh, let's see. So my admin creds on the laptop and my daily in a VM or vice versa. So you're talking about a privileged access workstation or something like that, the PAW concept. So you absolutely could go down that route where you have a device that is incredibly secure, right? And you don't browse the internet from the device. You don't do things like that from the system itself. It is there for you to simply move to other systems on the network. And then you have a VM that you load up on that device that you do all of your normal work from. Very important that you don't have administrative access to that VM, right? That VM is there. It's a standard Windows device in a way, Windows image. So yes, you could go down that route. There are other ways that you could take as well. But when we look at this, we want to have this idea of we have our tier 0 devices, like our domain controllers. And then we have some other tiering. Maybe you have accounts that you do, you make changes to administer to user accounts or groups or things like that in AD. That would be a different account. And then you have your server account, admin, all of this stuff, breaking it down however you want until you have your normal user. And you do not let the boundaries cross. Mm-hmm. Bill and I recently did a pen test for a client just a couple of weeks ago. Very nice place, very nice people. They had really, really, really strong credential compartmentalization.
Yep.
We could not get from point A to point B. There was no path. Well, all right, there was a path, but that's a different story altogether. But as far as how they were separating accounts, how they were using it, where they could go, there wasn't a point A to a point B. It's very important that we think about this. I like to think about it more than just a archery target like I have here. I would rather think about it like a dartboard, right? So, hey, we have our, what was your example, Bill? IoT, right? We have our IoT devices. Yep. All right. that's like a separate account. And maybe there's administrative levels and differences within those accounts too. It is up to you as an organization to decide how this breaks down, where you want to separate it, how you want to split the pie in any number of methods, as long as it makes sense. And it meets both the security objective and your operational objective, right? I know administrators are like, oh, I can't have 40 different accounts. I would agree that might be much, but maybe not. It depends on what you're doing or what you're protecting. But more than two, more than three, really. It's the idea of trying to separate where we're using things.
We actually had a lot of conversation on this earlier. That some people will look at this and take this as it has to be exactly like this setup that's on the screen right now. Not necessarily the case. The idea is that you're breaking those out into things that are purposeful, like Eric said, functional, and that makes sense for the organization. However, if there's areas that if that section were compromised, the goal here is going to be to limit whatever impact if something in that group, right, if something in that role happens to be compromised. And so when you start looking at it in those terms, this becomes a guide, right? This becomes a guideline for here's examples of how you can separate those things, and you want to do it to the degree that makes sense for organization. How many people you have, what your size is, your operations, all of those types of things will factor into how you set this up eventually or ultimately.
And this doesn't necessarily replace the idea of privileged access management or having PIM or something else in your environment. If you do, that can put in those layers of controls. They can help. Not everybody has those tools. Not everybody has the licenses for Entra or whatever it might be, however you want to do it. Pulling CyberArk or the other tools that will let you log into it and manage your passwords and then give you a shell to something else. All of those cost money. It's that classic triangle, right, of security. We have secure things, we have cheap things, we have usable things. And where do you want to be on that scale, right? Let's figure it out. I like to think that I told Bill this earlier, right? I like to think of credential compartmentalization of having some gigantic barrier between everything. We can go down this idea of zero trust and all this wonderful technology that we need to get to and implement. But that still doesn't always solve the same solution as if there is no way to get from point A to point B. If I have to swim across the Pacific Ocean by myself, I'm not going to do it. It's not going to happen, right? There's no way to get here from here to there. And that's kind of what we're talking about. And we need to be sure there are these barriers because of wonderful tools like Bloodhound, everybody's favorite, written by some incredibly smart people out there. Bloodhound itself may or may not work in your environment, depends, but there are other tools that do the same thing. There's other ways of finding this information of where people like to log in and what's going on. And you find these directions as a pen tester and you just start leveraging where things are going from point A to point B. Would I allow shared accounts on tier 3 devices, library, kiosk? Ooh, interesting question. So when you say shared, are you discussing like this device is logging in itself and therefore it is, So user, right. So interesting question. I would say it depends what those devices are connected to themselves. If all they are kiosks, in theory, you could share that account. That's the bigger problem is accountability, right? Knowing what those things are doing. How are you tracking who's using that user account to do something? And that is the bigger problem. On the downside, if you have 40 different accounts or kiosks, that is more accounts that you have to create out there for them to use. But once again, that then begins to have the idea of what else do you have on your network that those accounts can see. We'll talk about some of these big failures we see. Shared accounts are always going to be a problem, but you need them. I would also say, why does a kiosk device need an actual domain credential? What are they getting to that requires that?
I would something else that comes to mind with that, if for anyone who's been in the CIS material, even though shared accounts would be technically against the best practice, not everything is going to be protected to the same degree. And so if this is something that is low impact, confidential information, there's nothing sensitive there. To Eric's question, what are the domain credentials actually being used for? Right. All of those determine the level of controls that are needed for any particular system, as in what's its criticality, and right, how much confidentiality you have to work with on these systems.
And Chris, yep, PAM can help with shared accounts accountability, depending on your implementation of PAM, right? If you're talking about the tools that you sign in, hopefully using MFA, you sign in and it presents you a screen of where you can go and it signs you into that device using its set of credentials and it's tracking what you're doing, that's great. But not every solution has that level of auditing and accountability of what's going on. So it depends, but it absolutely can help. I always like to point out, by the way, that if you ever get this pop-up when you're doing a bloodhound scan, it doesn't make a difference what that number is. It could be, 700, it could be 10,000. It's always a bad day, right? There's way too much going on. There's way too many different paths to take from point A to point B, whatever it might be. The other thing, we are focused absolutely on administrative access right now when we're talking about this, but we need to think about it for more than just administrative access. Bloodhound, the default queries for Bloodhound are, I have a normal user and I want to get to domain admin. Well, that may not be the end goal, right? We just did a pen test last week for a company where the goal was not domain admin. It was, can you access this application? Mm-hmm. All right, yeah. If I get domain admin, I can absolutely access that application. We're good to go. But that doesn't mean that's the only way. Is there a pathway from my user account you gave me to Steve's account, who is able to access this app as an administrator? Then I'm going to follow that pathway. So we need to figure out just access management in general. But since we're talking about administrative access,
yeah,
let's cover some downfalls here. It's okay, right? Yep, I do have an administrative account. It's okay. I don't log into my workstation with it. It's fine. I don't do that. I do things like run as, or I map a drive, or I use PowerShell commandlets. All of these are bad, right? You've not actually saved yourself at all. You've made maybe one step harder, maybe depending on what you're doing, or maybe you've made it easier depending on what you're doing. You really cannot use more privileged accounts on less secure devices. That's really the breakdown, because as soon as you do, if I, as an attacker, get admin access to that box, you have a problem, right? Yeah. Workstations are the favorite. Once again, they're used everywhere, lots of potential options. Maybe administrative access is blocked and I can only access your user profile, right? Because I'm you. Still potentially have some issues. So it's really about separating these accounts and where they're doing. Why does this work this way? All of you may not have done pen tests in the past. You may not have seen what we like to do at times. So let me give a quick little demo or three here to show you what we're talking about. It changed my windows. All right. So here we go. First up, I have this box. This is a server. I have local administrative, right? That you can see the name here is Win something, and I'm just using a local account, Win something. I don't even have domain creds. But I picked this box either A, because I knew there was a target where there's somebody else logged in, or I've done Bloodhound or some other way, and I say, hey, here's this user one guy. User one also has like a server admin account and a domain admin account. Maybe he's doing something. So just by logging in, we can start looking to see what processes there are. At this moment, we immediately have a failure, right? Because I'm on this box as an administrator, regardless of what tools we want to use. And we're going to use Mimikatz because that's the big, bad Active Directory Windows credential stealing tool out there. It doesn't make a difference. At this point, we immediately have a problem because I can become user one. We've written our own custom scripts. Travis has his awesome script out there that's, I think, built on Rust that does something else with something else that lets you inject into a process. At this moment, we can become you and move on because we have this access with you. By the way, when I inject into a process that somebody else is using, I like to pick the one that's the antivirus or anti-malware screen. That's all. I always find that funny, right? Hey, here is whatever tool. Sophos, whatever, right? And here's their little the exe that shows you their screen share. So I'm going to pick that. So we have a problem, but I know they're logged in. Since I'm on this box as an administrator and I've been able to bypass some controls, right? I can come on here and we're just going to run Mimikatz directly. I know we're doing some fictitious stuff. In theory, it should be harder than this. Let's actually go to the right directory. All right. We're in Mimikatz. If you're not familiar with it, incredibly awesome tool. It was built by Benjamin there to try and figure out Windows security, not necessarily bypass it, but now it's turned into the big way of bypassing it. It is a utility that does this. It is not the only utility, which is why people have started building tools to detect behaviors and not just it running. Very important that you don't just look for this running. Privilege. Yep, very good. I have to tell it I want to run a system because I want to interact with another person, and I need to spell privilege right. Why can I not? Because it's a demo, and I didn't bring the chicken. We talked about this. I needed the fried chicken. All right,
you didn't sacrifice the fried chicken.
I didn't sacrifice the fried chicken, so we're in trouble. All right, so
there you go.
Through this, Mimikatz has a way of dumping passwords. If URL SA log on passwords. So it used to be prior to Windows 2012 R2 that if you ran this command, you would see all of the clear text credentials, IDs, passwords, everything for everybody in the box. It doesn't work that well anymore because it is Windows 2012 R2 newer. It doesn't show you these things. So let me find my user that signed in. User 1 is going to be here somewhere. User 1 is going to be in this list. Bill, yell out when you see user 1. There he is. All right. So I logged in as admin. I'm not actually anywhere, but we have user 1. Now, right off because we were able to do this, we have their NTLM hash. We could start using other tools to log in, right, with their hash. We're okay. But we want to take this further. As we can see, user 1 is logged in, but it doesn't look like they're doing anything, or at least I don't have clear text credentials. But let's say user 1 does do something. Let me share my screen again. I can switch screens. I know that this is user 1 because it's red. It's bad. All right, so let's do the run as. Yeah, it's red. It's bad. Let's do the run as. Let's pick. We'll pick SA1. Server admin. He decided to do a run as server 1. SA1. So this account, who am I? So we can get flagged by every endpoint protection known to man because I just ran who am I. That immediately says you're malicious. Give it a second to think. Come on, bud. There we go. We see, hey, this window is actually running as a different account, SA1. Now I have to switch screens again. I would share my entire screen, but then it wouldn't look very good for everybody. If we run the same command again, took it forever, but it finished, we will see that in this list, somewhere, there should be something for SA1. Did I pass it?
Was that it? No, I saw 1. Never mind.
Yeah, there it is. So we loaded our profile into this box, just as if we had logged in. Sure, it's not at the console. I don't have actual desktop there. I can't see it. But it has been pulled down. We now have access to this account. Mm-hmm. We can become him again, right? All those same things that we could do before. It's still here. So not that good. Really not much better than just logging in. At least you are running as a separate window, kind of shadowed in your own console session, so that if you click on the bad link, it doesn't immediately get to run scripts as you and do something, right? It's at least half a step better. Well, let's say SA1 here, or my wonderful person, decides it's okay, I'm going to not do this because I've learned that that's bad. Oh, I can't do a profile. My IT people have said this is bad. We can't do that. I'm never going to do that again. So instead, let me use PowerShell and do a get credential. What this does is it says when I use creds after I store this. So let's type in my credentials and not try and talk at the same time. This time I'm going to do something as a domain admin. So now when I try and do something through this PowerShell window, like, hey, let's just connect to my domain out there. But I'm going to specify a set of credentials I've stored. The window itself is still user 1, but this command ran out and did the command as DA1. Well, this changes things remarkably for us as pen testers. We're going to run that same command, log on passwords. It's our favorite. Here we go. That just stored it in clear text, right? We have weakened our security by using our credentials in what we thought was a more secure manner because I didn't load the profile. It's not there, but it's technically worse, right? Now, one benefit is if DA1 did have MFA associated with it and was required to do anything, we would only have the password. We wouldn't have MFA. Unfortunately, for some people, when they're implementing MFA, MFA is done at the server level, like through the Gina. I've replaced the login process for my box. It requires that this box is going to reach out and connect to Okta or connect to this or connect to whatever to say, yes, let me do the MFA check. That does nothing if you aren't interacting with the box in that way. So if you're set up in that manner and you're thinking MFA is going to protect me, well, I have the password. I can do the exact same thing that this person did, the administrator did, and use these credentials remotely, right? So you get the same behavior for mapping a drive. And here's the one that everybody has the most heartburn about, RDP.
Mm-hmm.
Scary, scary thought. As soon as you RDP from your desktop to a remote server, you're going to show up in here with that same thing, right? Your password for your more secure account is here. So we need to have separate devices. That was my quick demo. All right, like 12 minutes, went halfway okay. But you would start seeing things fill up. The gist of it is we can't use these accounts everywhere, right? We need to start separating. We need to have specially created devices, or because that costs more money, I understand, and we want to make sure that things are usable and secure, but not expensive. So you only use those credentials on the devices you need. If I have a server administrator account, I should only use those credentials on servers, etc.
Yeah, that was part of the conversation we were having earlier about not just operations or admins, but organizations as a whole. This is probably the area with different devices where people would tend to have pushback.
Yep. Does enabling credential card protect against all of some of those or just some? Great question. And the answer is it depends. Favorite. So credential guard and things, there's two different ways of doing it. One requires that I can load a system driver on the box, in which case I can bypass it. And off the top of my head, I can't remember the bypass for the second one. Both of them can potentially be bypassed. It does help. Absolutely, it does help. But it's not as good as having that separate box. That's why I always like to say if you don't have the path, it's not there, right? Just having it there, it once again, it does help. It's an extra thing to see. It's an extra thing to catch. That is always the goal as a defender. The more hoops we have to make an attacker go through, the better chance we're going to see something happen. We're going to detect it, be able to say, that's odd. Let's start looking at it.
Yep.
However, oddity is not always immediately a problem. I lost my train of thought there as I read the answer. So it's not always that it is a problem, and vice versa. Incidents don't always immediately look like incidents. They quite often look like other behaviors. The RDB to the other box, I think it does, but I'm going to get back to you because I don't want to say for certain without checking, because I think you're right. Excuse me. I believe you're right, but I can't remember off the top of my head. So
for the storing credentials for the RDP?
Yes, it does. Credential guard prevent that? And I don't remember.
I see. I thought he was mentioning about for this scenario that don't RDP to the like using other credentials.
Oh yeah. So right. So I mean, you have other methods that you could do the same behavior, right? So if we want to stay Microsoft centric, you could always set up remote desktop services that has different devices you can connect to. You hit the web page and you sign in there. You don't actually RDP to the box. There are other similar things like that that can start limiting what you do. Oh, and I ran through the demo. So yeah, I had the demo page there. So things, though, that we need to remember when we are trying to figure out this whole idea of credential compartmentalization. It's easy when we talk about our server admins and our domain admins, but there are unfortunately groups out there that often break this credential compartmentalization idea. And it seems to be a common trend everywhere I go. I see it over and over and over again. And the number one person on or group on this list, not person, group on this list is developers. Yeah, some of my favorites. I don't like picking on developers. I really don't, right? And that's not why I'm doing it. But 9 times out of 10, developers have admin access on something, and they're using their regular accounts somewhere. Shocked Pikachu. Yep. Right. And then we start seeing the other failures of credential compartmentalization. Hey, yep, that's a dev server that I can log into with my normal account. It's just dev. It's okay. Oh, but I'm using the same service account as I do in prod, or the database, the credentials I use to connect to the database is the same because we're sharing the same database server. It's just a different database, or any number of things. We start seeing this failure all over again, and the web just branches, which brings me to my next favorite group, DBAs. I'm not a DBA. I'll never say I'm a DBA. I did DBA-like work in the past, but they're the next big group. They like to do their work from their desktop. They don't RDP. And quite often I see DBAs, they may not have administrative access to that server with their normal account, but they sure do have DBO, right? Database owner. I'm not an admin on that box, but it's okay. I compromise that account and I can get to all the databases and see all the data. So they're another big group that I often see right below developers. Next one, service accounts. Whew. Boy, is this a huge, huge one in so many different ways. Let's not talk about SPNs for a minute. Let's just talk about service accounts. Microsoft methodology of a service account is a set of credentials that you use to log in as a service on a box. That means all it can do is run that service. I'm betting that everybody on this call and everybody who hears this webcast and anybody who ever talks to or any environment I go to, when I get service accounts, those accounts are running a system, logging in as administrators. They're doing all these other things. They have not been restricted. So bam, an instant way of escalating. You add in the service principal name issue, which goes to Kerberoasting and the ability to get passwords for service accounts, and the fact that service accounts are typically created by people, so they have weak passwords, and we have all these other slews of problems. To top it off, we don't separate service accounts or management and security applications into credential compartmentalization. We run our Nessus scans or our whatever scans or our NAC. Ooh, let's pick on NAC. NAC's my favorite. We run our NAC as domain admin because it needs to check every device on the network, and it's the only way it's going to know and be able to log in to do stuff. I think even Jason is the first one to do well, all right, I'm on the network and the NAC came through and it kicked me off because it detected me as not a real device. But that's okay because I set up my relay and that triggered. And so the NAC came through, it kicked me off, but I then logged, connected back into the network. My relay was good and I had admin access on that server over there.
Yep.
Right.
I was going to say we've found numerous times during penetration tests where a service account is a domain admin.
Oh yeah. Horrible problem. Should not occur unless it is actually running a service on a domain controller, which shouldn't happen. But your management and security applications themselves, depending on what you're using and how you're working, you need to find a way to separate what they're connecting to different types of devices with, right? If I'm connecting to my workstations, hopefully my workstations are on their own network and not the same network as servers. If they're all together, now we have a different problem. We need to do some interesting thinking. But hopefully they're separate. In which case, why do I need to log into a DA on a workstation when I can just use something that has admin access to workstations? Losing workstations is bad. I agree, 100%. Don't want that to occur. But it's better than losing everything all at once, right? Or immediately pivoting to domain admin. So having that once again, that level of separation is very, very important. And then the last one that is always forgotten everywhere we go: domain users and authenticated users. This is what bit our client, unfortunately, a couple of weeks ago. As soon as I log into a domain or into a box with domain creds, we have rights, we have permissions, we can do things. Unless administrators have actively started removing rights and checking, we get to read all the information out of AD, except for passwords, hopefully. We can start seeing shares, file shares. We can start doing all this other stuff. We can request certificates, probably, any number of things. We should not be granting domain users or authenticated users excessive permissions to things. There are shares that they'll have to be able to read from. Net logon on domain controllers. Don't remove that. That would be bad, right? They need to see that share. Probably whatever shares they're pulling updates from, they should have read access to. But I don't know the number of times that we get to towards the end and we're like, well, we don't have a pathway. Let's start surfing shares. Let's see what's out there. And we find passwords in clear text in files. Great. Even if we don't, as I mentioned, a pen test, the goal is not to get domain admin. That's never my goal. My goal is to do whatever you have paid me to do, to get to find. We don't want personal identifiable information to be seen by people unless they're supposed to see it. Great. So when we log in and we see all of the images for people when they check into like a healthcare area and their information and their names and addresses and all of these things, as a regular user who should have rights to nothing because you didn't put me in any groups, that's a problem, right? Yeah. These are the failures we see over and over and over again. Even when an organization says, yep, all of my admins have separate accounts, we're doing great. Most likely, these 5 things have been forgotten to one level or another.
Would it be accurate to say that you should never trust domain users? Like out
yeah,
as a group. So when you're setting up permissions on something, you don't just assume that domain users are safe to put in there. You always use some other group, right?
Yeah, unless it really is something that is not. Nope. Unless it is something that really everybody does need to see, because once again, where you're storing patches, there are some instances where it's appropriate, but that's when it's not the standard. The exception. Thank you. Yeah. That's the exception, not the standard.
Yeah.
So then we hit. Oh, go ahead, Bill. Sorry.
No, I was thinking of the service accounts. Another issue that we see with those quite often is sometimes those passwords have not been changed in 20 years or more.
Oh, yeah.
And so even if they do have longer, more secure passwords for the accounts, the service accounts themselves, the fact that they've been there for years gives people a lot more time to crack them.
And password requirements have changed over the last 24 years. Right. Heck, it was just a little bit. Yeah. I mean, when did history? I don't know. So it used to be 8 characters. That was what everybody knew, right? And now we're moving to like 12 to 15 characters, which is great. Mm-hmm. But if that service account hasn't changed its password in 6 years, 7 years, it's probably using the 8-character string, unless you're really set and you've gone through and made sure they're very, very secure, long, complex 25-character passwords.
Well, there were some entities that were using larger passwords 20 years ago, but that was military related, right? Because I distinctly remember in the early 2000s when the password requirements went to 14 and 16 characters and then up to 18 or 20, just for normal user accounts. So there were some typically related to government entities that had those, but by and large, that was not the case in corporate.
Fair enough. And then we run into the other issue of, I have a very long password, but it's like a common normal thing. Or yeah, like ZAXSCDVFBGNHM, whatever. Anything, yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. Shift 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, whatever. All of those wonderful things that are easily guessed, well known, and always found, right?
Yep.
They need to be long, complex, difficult to guess. No Bible verses, no sports teams, no, I mean, we could go through the list of things.
Movies, all kinds of things like that. Yep.
Correct. Yeah, there you go. Well, space would be better. Boy, does it bother me when I can't use a space, but that's a different story. So we use dashes or something. And then we hit our next big one. It's okay, Eric, Bill, Jason, don't worry. We're moving to the cloud. We don't need to worry about this Windows problem anymore. We're going to get rid of our on-prem domain. Well, that's great. Unfortunately, I don't know how many people I've talked to, and all this idea of more than one account just disappeared. We moved to the cloud, and we have one account that does everything again all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We took a step back. I'm like, more than one account, right? It doesn't change because you're moving to the cloud, right? It has not changed the requirement. You may not need 20 anymore, but you just can't have one, right? And it better be protected by MFA, right? If you have a cloud account of any kind and it is not protected by MFA, you are just asking for problems.
You're doing it wrong.
You're doing it very wrong. Yeah. If you have an administrative account in Entra, I know it says Azure, in Entra or Azure, because you haven't, whatever. And you have the conditional access policy that says, when I'm on my corporate network, I don't need MFA for admin accounts. You are doing it wrong. You're doing it so wrong that Microsoft just announced today they are going to be enforcing policies in the next 90 days that require all administrative accounts to always need MFA.
Really?
That's how wrong you're doing it.
I missed that one.
Yep. So there you go. Things that are happening, and Microsoft saying we need to make changes, right? Yeah. So, yeah, Microsoft's like, hey, you're gonna see these new rules appear in audit mode. Make sure you're okay because we're gonna turn it on to enforce it soon. So yeah, be ready. You don't need to have a full P1 license for a cloud only account. If you have your users, 150, 1,000, however many users, and they all have M365 licenses that come with a P1 license, when you make that cloud only administrative or privileged account, it's still running in a P1 Azure AD. You're set. That's a great question. MFA, I don't know how they're going to bypass that. But they're going to do that. And the sync account itself, that's a great question, Jared. I'm going to have to see that because, yes, it doesn't change the on-prem use. It's only when you're logging into the cloud to do it. So they're going to have to figure out something on that. I don't know what they're going to do. But yes, if you're actively logging in with the sync account, it would cause a problem. So to top it off, when I come back to thinking about Azure, my next favorite thing is many orgs aren't doing it yet, but the write back. We are syncing into Azure. Soon, people are going to start treating Azure as the authoritative and writing back into their on-prem environments. Probably, I would expect. If you relax the permissions in Azure and you allow those regular user accounts to do changes, if I can access Azure and make changes and they write back, we've kind of defeated that whole separation again. Mm-hmm. So with 12 minutes left, where are we? We need to have more than one account. We need to have them be used in different places. We need them to have separate passwords. We need more than 2. 4 might be too many. I don't think so. I don't think 5's too many, but that's me. Like I said, I had 26 accounts. So what's 5? Okay. We, especially if credential vaults, right? We can have multiple. Just be sure that credential vault is protected by MFA. That's my other escalation path I forgot to mention. My other favorite. Yep, we have a credential vault. We're safe. We log into that with a normal user account. Ooh, okay, fine. And we forgot to turn MFA on it. Oh, great. So move in. Yeah, it's safe because it's in the cloud. Exactly. So things to think about. We need more than 2, at least 3, right? If you're in an environment where you only have 2, you need to have at least 3. Domain admin needs to be on its own. Special, only on its own, only to do specific things in the directory. And then we could talk about breaking it down. I don't know, Bill, I know I think I overrode you on things because you had so many good points earlier.
Well, you incorporated them into what we were talking about anyway. So it was.
Sorry, I took it from you. I stole the wind from your sails.
Wind at our back.
Yeah, wind at our back. Exactly.
I wonder if anyone noticed the nautical themes on the slide titles.
Yeah, I don't know. I worked hard at that. It's the small things, and really it comes down to, right, why do we want credential compartmentalization? And it goes back to the idea of a ship, right? Ships are built in a very specific way. You can lose a section and they close it off, and you don't lose the whole ship. It's the same idea with credential compartmentalization. If you're on a cruise ship and it hits an iceberg, do you want to lose that one small part where hopefully nobody's in anymore? They pulled everybody out, or do you want the whole ship to go down? Same general idea. There you go.
Yeah, and realizing that this is focused a lot on your credential management, that's not taking into consideration that there are other controls, right? There are other things that are also used in tandem, right? In conjunction with these principles that you can really, the segmentation, there's a lot of things you can leverage to help bolster.
Absolutely.
This in general. Yeah.
And yeah, but the idea of account tiering, credential compartmentalization falls into that same idea. Network segmentation was there. You don't want to have path to path network wise. Great. But then we're in this network, but you allowed everybody to do everything, right? So there are ways, it's layers of security is the way to go. How do you deal with pushback from users who saying having multiple accounts is too much work? So if we're talking a normal user, they may or may not need more than one account. Show them this webinar. Perfect. Please. Yeah, but it depends. Normal users get a little bit more leeway, right? Because they should just be doing normal user functions. Yes, we didn't even cover access management for normal users in this talk at all. That would be a great thing to talk about. I don't know many organizations that do an effective access review and cleanup of normal users. That's a whole separate talk that we can get into at some point, in tools and things like that. Normal users probably going to get some by. You want to be sure that they're doing it. But admins, people who have privileged access, those are the ones that we want to talk about the most. Those are the ones that we need to lock down first. It's kind of like when you do your first pen test, depending on the company, you might have a whole bunch of things on your report. You're like, this is way too much. We weren't prepared. What are we going to do? Right? It's the same idea with this. Let's talk about the biggest problems first, and then we can start talking about others. Prioritize things. Exactly. Let's take care of privileged access, admin access, things like that. And then we could figure out regular users at some point, maybe.
Yep. That was a good question.
That was a great question. But I'm going to tell you, when you say, hey, we need to have more than two accounts to your admins, they're going to go, it's over. Life is over. I can't do it. I get it. I was in operations I was in operations for 17 years before I came here. Right. I get it. I didn't like having more than one account. But you need it. I mean, even though I didn't like it, I did it. I got it. I had those accounts. I had different passwords on those accounts, right? You just moved on. And when I needed to do something, I used that account. It's a small shift in your mentality, right? We are not asking for huge productivity loss to use different accounts.
I actually like the way that you can handle it in AWS, the multiple accounts where you're actually logging in with a single account,
but you request a different role.
But then you're moving it yourself into a different role, and that role is restricted quite granularly, and that's a little bit more convenient because you can still do SSO, still require MFA, you have limited time tokens and all that kind of good stuff.
Yep.
But then you can make sure that you're only going, like if you need to perform a job function as an admin, you're going in with the admin that is designed, that role that's designed for that task.
Yep. So. And Azure has the same idea that they have the PIM modules, privileged identity management. Unfortunately, it requires a P2 license or you buy PIM access. That's a downside. But it's same idea, right? It's all about requesting the access that you need And then hopefully you can build in some controls of, I want this access. And somebody says, yes, you can have it. That's the best way. What are your best practices for developers? Oh, this is so, okay. If we want to talk about if I were to limit developers, I would need a strong CI/CD pipeline, and they are doing things and they are writing their programs and they get checked in and everything happens from there on. They don't actually have the rights to push this to the dev server, right? It's going through a separate process that's handling that. Jason, do you agree?
Yeah, like a forced change management process. So there's checkpoints that are built into your CI/CD pipeline to make sure that, for example, what you don't want to have is a case where the CI/CD pipeline itself has a lot of privileges, but developers can essentially write code to it that's going to execute with those privileges. So you still have to have checks and balances in place for change management to make sure that doesn't happen.
Now, assuming you don't have even that level, right? We just have our devs who are writing code on their boxes. I would have a separate network. This is me. I'd have a separate network that they do this on, right? I would not have them in the same general population. I would prefer that they do their development with a separate set of credentials, not on their laptops.
That's what I was thinking. Separate accounts per dev.
That's not always practical.
It's not always practical. I get it, right? So this is where you find what can we do? What's the best thing for us as an org?
Well, there are cloud-based development environments that you can use. Right?
You can do that too.
So that's one option. So you move the development to the cloud, but they still have a local laptop, and they're basically working through either an IDE that works remotely or through a browser-based IDE.
Yep.
And that gives you more centralized control over things, but still gives them the flexibility to be able to do what they need to do.
Thank you for joining us. I was going to say developers, and once again, I don't pick on developers because I don't like them. Some of my friends are developers. Really good friends are developers, right? My boss is a developer, so I gotta like them. I mean, so it's about limiting what they can do automatically, but allowing them to do their work, right? So it is a balance. I absolutely get it. But if I was going to come onto an environment and I saw that developers were doing development on their local laptops with administrative access on those laptops and pushing changes to dev servers with their normal user credentials, all of that would be like its own little environment on its own, right?
I would actually say the bigger problem that we find with developers, or that I found during pen tests especially, is they tend to stand things up as like part of an experiment or something that then becomes this orphaned thing that's still out there.
Sure. Yep.
And it's just there forever.
Yep. And leveraging the same credentials as their production environment.
It's the same credentials. And so we're able to, use that as pivot point or a place to set up an attack to stage an attack from or whatever. Yeah.
Yep. It's always, yes, because it's a dev environment and therefore controls are weakened because they need to do something, right? We get it.
So I to your point earlier, I hadn't really thought about this as doing it as a best practice, but it makes a lot of sense. Setting up a separate, like almost an isolated network for those development experiments and things that, you can't get from there back into the main network. That would be a really good way to do it, because that would give the developers the flexibility to be able to stand up whatever they need to do, their own private cloud or whatever it is, but still limit the risk to the rest of the organization.
Yep. Yeah. So cool. All right. Well, 1 minute. We did it.
I think we're done. I'd like to close this out with saying thank you very much for dropping all of this knowledge. This was heck. I learned. I always do learn some stuff when we have these types of conversations. So I learned a bunch. Hopefully everybody else did too.
Yep.
The one thing I wanted to bring up is our next couple of sessions. Let me bring these in front of me here. On the 17th, we have improving application security with PCI software security framework. Okay, so it's an AppSec topic specifically around PCI software. So that should be kind of interesting. And bear in mind that PCI has set the standard not just for the payment card industry, but a lot of other industries use them as a template. So it's a really good place to start for AppSec in general. And then on the 6th of December, we have a very popular topic, which
Flipper
is
Zero.
Flipper Zero.
Yeah.
So more hands-on stuff. Jennifer's going to be going over some things with Flipper Zero. Everybody likes that one.
Oh yeah.
Even if it's not part of your day job, it's just a lot of fun to play with. So
and see all the things it can do. Yeah.
Exactly. So we have that.